Welcome back to the Dean Obeidallah Show. Joining us right now, Deja Foxx, Democratic candidate for Congress running in Arizona's 7th Congressional District. She's only 25, will be the first female Gen Z member of Congress. We've had the Gen Z male member of Congress, Maxwell Frost, on several times, but if Deja wins, she'll be the first female member of Gen Z. Deja, welcome. Thanks for being on. Great job in the debate last night. I saw you had a candidates debate. Very good job.
Thank you for having me. And that's right. We walked off the debate stage last night, and today we're hearing really good feedback that folks felt fought for, and they recognize the differences between me and those other candidates on stage.
It's pretty stark. I have so look, on your website, you have an interesting line. You write, I didn't pick politics, politics picked me. Share how politics picked you.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up here in Tucson. I was raised by a single mom, and we relied on Section 8 housing, SNAP benefits or food stamps, Medicaid, and I was a free lunch kid in our public schools. All of that has everything to do with politics. I knew what it felt like from a very young age to see elected officials make decisions about the things I needed to just get by, right? What they debated on the news had real life impacts for my ability to have food on the table, a roof over my head, or even get a physical to play sports in school, right? And so I've been no stranger to politics. I didn't need to learn it in a class or even from the news. I learned it because I've lived it. I've lived good policy.
Mhm.
When I was 16 years old, I was experiencing homelessness. My mom struggled with substance abuse. And while she navigated a rehabilitation process, I navigated life on my own. And my very first viral video was an encounter with Senator Jeff Flake. He was a Republican here in Arizona who voted in lockstep with the first Trump administration to defund Planned Parenthood centers right here in Arizona. And those are the very same centers I relied on when I had no money, no parents, and no insurance to get the care I needed, birth control, to take control of my body and my future while navigating life on my own. And I went to a town hall when Republicans still hosted those and asked him this question, why he would deny me the American dream, why he would take that ability to control my body and my future away from me. And that question resonated. Something like 17 million people saw it the next day. And it's the question I'm still asking of Republicans. When good policy lifts people up, right, allows them, like me, to be the first in my family to go to college, why would we deny people the American dream?
And what do they say to it? When you ask Republicans, Jeff Flake and others, why do Republicans want to take away the American dream?
Well, what they'll say and what they mean are two different things. With
Mhm.
this most recent Republican budget bill, right, we saw them hide it in the dead of night, call hearings after midnight, call votes in the hours of 1, 2 a.m. And they are trying to hide what they are doing from the American people because they know that it is deeply unpopular to cut Medicaid,
Mhm.
to limit SNAP benefits, right? To take food away from our most vulnerable families, and to defund places like Planned Parenthood, where so many of us have relied on care. And so they hide it in the middle of the night to avoid answering this question. But the real answer is that they are prioritizing billionaires over families like ours. They want to line the pockets of their donors and their billionaire friends at the expense of working families, single moms like the ones that raised me.
So when you speak to people who are now on Medicaid, which really
Yeah,
is the lifeline for people,
that's right.
and food stamps, and since you've gone through that experience, what are those conversations like for them and for you?
Yeah, I mean, I just hosted a roundtable, intimate in my living room in the days following that budget bill vote, in which we invited storytellers to share what Medicaid has meant to them. And we had a mix of folks in the room. I mean, one woman, a neonatal doctor who takes care of our tiniest and most vulnerable folks, shared that half of the babies, or more than half of the babies born here in Arizona, are born on Medicaid, on access is what we call it here in Arizona.
Mhm.
And there's nothing pro-family about taking away that care.
Right.
Similarly, there was a young woman who was actually on a pre-med track in school, whose mother was diagnosed with cancer, and her family had to make a hard decision. Would they start care now and not make the bills this month, or delay treatment to be able to afford the cost of living? They delayed treatment, and she lost her mother. And these are the kinds of stories that if we see more Medicaid cuts, we will hear time and time again. And it's enough to say, Oh, well, we'll make it through the Trump administration, but will we? Will people's families? What are the stories and the impacts that come with those cuts today? And that's what Democrats are frankly failing to understand, right? They're so focused on re-elections, they're failing to remember what is happening here on the ground with their constituents. And I'll share one closing line, which is that we had a young man show up to this storytelling session who had never been to a political event before.
Mhm.
Um, and he didn't share much as we were storytelling, but at the very end, I asked these folks, "What is your message to these Republicans who voted to strip this funding from Medicaid?" And he shared with us, how can these people, these elected officials, these Congress people, take this funding away if they have ever sat with people like us? And the answer is that they haven't. They refuse to, by and large. Um,
Yep.
and it is because they're too busy sitting with their donors. And that's a problem that is endemic to our government as it stands, and it's why people feel so frustrated.
I'm chatting with Deja Fox, Democratic candidate for Congress in Arizona's 7th district. I mean, it really explains why in this big presidential election where we said everything's on the line,
Mhm.
a third of Americans didn't even show up. To them, it doesn't really matter anymore. And they're disenchanted from the whole system. You mentioned before we started about what does Democratic Party stand for? You're 25. You just picked the Democratic Party. Like, I mean, in recent years, you've made a choice. You could have been a Republican, you could have been independent, anything else. What attracted you to the Democratic Party, and what does it stand for in your mind at its best?
At its best.
Like, what attracts? So,
I
what do
am.
you want it to stand for? More importantly, than what does it
Well,
stand for?
yeah, this is the question. This 2025 special election that I'm running in Southern Arizona has less than 50 days, but it has implications not just for my constituents, but people all across the country. It is the first referendum on if we learned our lessons in 2024. And it will set the tone for who we are as a party and where we go as a country in the 2026 midterms. This special election here in Arizona has national implications. And so when I hear the question, what does the Democratic Party stand for? Um, I have put the pressure test on by being in this primary. What I hear from every establishment Democrat as they stump across the country is that they want a new generation of leaders. They want to see newer and younger leaders. And yet, when newer and younger comes along with a decade of experience to back it up, I have watched as the establishment has put their thumb on the scale to make it even harder for young working class candidates like me to get ahead and instead are investing in the same strategies, the same playbook, the status quo of legacy last names and big donors. And it is incredibly frustrating. And it's why we're losing young people to apathy and to the other side. And I am doing the hard work and the long-term work for this party to ask the question, what party will my generation inherit? Even when I don't see the party in my corner or the establishment organizations or politicians hopping in with us, I have continued to put my head down and do the hard work in a special election primary in the middle of summer in Arizona to bring out and engage new volunteers, new donors, new voters. And it's the kind of thing that we will be better off for.
So when you talk to other people who are Gen Z, polling and data shows that there's a divide where younger
Mm.
women are gravitating to the Democratic Party. Younger men are either not gravitating to either party or they're gravitating to the Republican Party and MAGA and Trump's brand. What do you see in Arizona? Is that backed up in Arizona? Do you see the same divide?
Yeah, we see this all across the country, and it has everything to do with Democrats' inability to communicate with young people.
Mhm.
I've been belittled by other people in this race for our use of social media and new media to communicate with voters. We have reached over 6 million people without a single dollar of paid behind it, just good storytelling on Instagram and TikTok alone. And I must stress, in a special election primary in the middle of summer in Arizona in an off year. That is not supposed to happen. And it
Right.
scares establishment politicians on both sides of the aisle to see young people like me taking up political and narrative power. And what I want to share is that I am running for a safer and bluer seat
Mhm.
in Arizona. This Democratic primary is hotly contested. But the question that we need to be asking as a party is with these bluer seats, how are we building our bench of leadership? And I offer something unique, the opportunity to send an effective messenger to DC. And when the Democrats have approval ratings in the 27%, right, then the question they need to be asking is, how do we get out of this? And it cannot be by doing the same playbook, right? We need to be bringing in folks like me who are staying competitive in new media and social media spaces, talking to the future of our party, these young people who are getting their news on platforms like TikTok, building their political opinions online. And that's true across the gender divide. And it has everything to do with why we're losing young folks, is our inability to compete online.
Yeah, I mean, there's an issue where we're not speaking to the issues, we're not speaking to the right way, or we're not speaking to them in ways that reach people.
That's
But
right.
because when I really look at what I think Democratic Party stands for, I think it's the working class party. I think it's a party that fights for the working class, ensures the wealthy pay their fair share, and provides a safety net for Americans across the country and opportunity. And when I think the base, when we have callers calling every night, we know what we're about. We don't have a identity crisis. We have a leadership crisis in this party. And that's what we're stuck with right now. So you have this push and pull, and it's not new to this generation. I'm older than you, but when I was younger, there's that same push and pull. Older people with power don't want to give it up because for them, some of them, it's their identity as a human being. Other, they feel like I've worked at it and I'm not going to give it up to someone. But so why would it be important so people understand for the first female Gen Z person to be elected to the U.S. House of Representatives?
Yeah, we need to have a hard conversation about age in this party and in our government. 3 Democrats have passed away in the House of Representatives in the last few months alone. And that budget bill that we talked about, right, that would strip Medicaid funding, take food off of the tables of families like mine, right, through cuts to SNAP, passed by 1 vote. Families like mine will have to live with the consequences of these decisions. People in my district presently have no representative in Congress.
Right.
And so we need to be having a hard conversation about age. If elected, I'd be the youngest member of the body at 25. And I'd be the first woman of my generation, Gen Z, elected. And that's not just some platitude. Gen Z is the first generation of women to have less rights than our mothers. And for the last 10 years, I've been an activist fighting on that very same issue, whether it was fighting my school board for better sex education when I was 15, because my school board members, one of which I'm actually running against in this primary, failed to update the curriculum, right? Let us be taught something that was last updated in the 80s, that didn't mention consent, was medically inaccurate, and was taught to me by the baseball coach. I had no parents at home to fill in those gaps. I went toe-to-toe with Republicans here in Arizona, Jeff Flake, who attempted to defund Planned Parenthood centers at the directive of Donald Trump. And when Roe versus Wade was overturned, I showed up to DC and was arrested on Capitol Hill in an act of civil disobedience alongside movement leaders. And that's the kind of leadership we need in this moment. It has everything to do with the kind of urgency that I bring as a young person, as a young woman, and with my decade of advocacy experience. It's not enough to just check the boxes anymore. We need champions.
Hey, I'm talking about Deja Foxx running for Congress as a Democrat in Arizona's 7th district. When you go around the 7th district, what are the issues? You've raised a lot of issues here. Are there other issues that voters are raising to you that you can share with us? Anything unique as well?
Yeah, I mean, this is not unique, but let's be clear. What people are worried about is affordability. I hear from young people time and time again that they save up their paychecks and they don't get any closer to moving out of their parents' house, that they are 1 car breakdown away from not making their rent this month, and that while home ownership felt like a promise for other generations, it's a million miles away for Gen Z. And they're frustrated, right? That has everything to do with the fact that wages have not gone up, but prices have, that we don't have enough affordable housing in this country. And so we need to be bringing all of our issues back to creating opportunity. And, I think where we've seen this work in my own personal story is connecting things like Planned Parenthood funding birth control access, back to that American dream that it is because of good policy, Title X funding at Planned Parenthood centers where I was able to receive birth control as a teenager, that I was able to go on to be the first in my family to go to college. That is a story that speaks to people in rural areas and in cities, to people on the right and the left, because everybody wants something better for their families. And so, when I think about the ways that I build the bench of leadership in the Democratic Party, it's not just because of my age or my social media savvy, right? It is also because we are in a deficit of working class leaders because it is so difficult to run for office when you don't have a legacy last name. Someone in my race inherited the former congressman, her father's fundraising list, right? This is
Wow.
the kind
Right.
of problem within
Right.
our systems, why we see the same leaders in and out, and nothing changes, because we don't have processes in which working class leaders are able to stand up and represent our families despite us being the ones most affected by the cuts made in DC.
Do people bring up at all the threat that Donald Trump poses to our freedoms, our Constitution, that kind of stuff? Or is
Oh,
it more
yeah.
bread and butter type of issues when you're traveling the district?
Yeah, I mean, we have a university right here in Tucson, the University of Arizona. And so conversations around First Amendment, around freedom of speech are top of mind,
Right.
not just for young people, but for everyone across the country watching. And so I would stand in the corner of those young people who are developing, building, finding their political home on their campuses, right? And so that's a conversation we're seeing on the ground in our district. And I want to caution people not to be an alarmist, but I was 15 years old when Donald Trump started running for president. He's been running for president for the last decade.
I know.
Um, and by the time he leaves office, should he not choose to totally upend our democracy and run for a third term or something, which, he seems to be lining up, I will be 28 years old. He started running when I was 15. And so I share that to say that people my age have never known a Republican Party not led by Donald Trump and his media circus. And
Mhm.
it is a difference between our ability to understand that there may be worse ahead if we don't intervene now. I think that so many people in older generations, especially these establishment politicians, believe that the Republican Party of my parents' generation will come back. That if they put their head down and wait this out, that things will inevitably get better. This will blow over. And I am here to tell you that that is not true. That is not a given. Democracy is something we work at day in and day out. And my generation has never known anything but this rising authoritarianism under Donald Trump.
Yeah, parties do redefine. The Democratic
Mhm.
Party at one point in the South was the party of segregation. That's never coming back. So, if you, the same thing, the old GOP is never coming back. And that's the only way I can make that point to people. They go, oh, yeah, the pro segregation wing of the Democratic Party is never going to come back and dominate it. Nope, it's not. They moved to the GOP. So, what about when and I'm sure there's countless families that are mixed status in terms of immigrants,
Yeah.
and you have Donald Trump waging a war on immigration, his ICE agents inflicting fear uh, by design, cruelty, scaring people. What do you hear from families when you travel around the district?
That's absolutely right. Donald Trump is a reality TV show host, first and foremost. He is no policy
Right.
expert, and he is attempting to make a show out of our homelands, our borderlands. Congressional District 7, where I'm running in a special election, uh, encompasses Tucson, parts of my hometown, but also hundreds of miles of the US-Mexico border. Towns like Yuma, Nogales, San Luis, and folks in Congressional District 7 know immigration. They have lived it, and they know that the policies of the Trump administration, his proposals to have reality TV shows where immigrants compete for citizenship is showmanship and is not about safety. That when he proposes allowing ICE agents into sensitive places, our places of worship, our schools, our hospitals, that doesn't make us any safer. I was just out with our campaign protesting at Tucson Medical Center where ICE officials attempted to separate a mother and her newborn. Nobody Nobody looks at that and thinks that's good policy, that that's humane, that that's American, right? And so we need people who are going to stand up to Donald Trump. And this is the critical question, not only here in Southern Arizona's special election, but all across the country, is that when we see elected officials standing up, right? Congress members standing outside of ICE facilities demanding their right and their responsibility to oversight being jostled, being threatened with arrest. We need to ask ourselves, what kind of fighters are we sending to DC? I've been arrested on Capitol Hill protesting. I know a little something about that. I've been an activist for the last 10 years pushing back on Donald Trump's extremism. It's going to take more than career politicians to get us out of this mess.
Absolutely. And, that I'm in New York, but I'm from Jersey, and, those Democrats went there, and I've had the mayor of Newark on in the past, and they were doing the right thing. And
Yeah.
Donald Trump's henchmen want to intimidate people. So last thing, you had the debate last night. The other candidates were there. You were
Yeah.
on the stage. You did a good job fighting, making getting out there your vision of what it should be. What's your takeaway from the debate before we wrap up?
I mean, that debate could not have made the point more clear that we need to elect fighters, and that the way we have always been doing things is not going to get us out of this mess. That it's not working for families like mine, right? Single moms who rely on Section 8 SNAP benefits and Medicaid, that they need a fighter in this moment, not just a politician. And what I'll share is I think one of the moments that sum the debate up best. Two career politicians on my left, bickering, going back and forth. And I stepped in and said, I need to get in here because there are two career politicians sitting next to me. And one of them was my school board member when I was 15 years old and I got my start in this work a decade ago.
Mm-hmm.
She had every opportunity to update the sex education curriculum that was last updated in the 80s, that didn't mention consent, medically inaccurate, taught by the baseball coach, right? That when I had no parents at home, left me at a disadvantage. And yet it took a young person like me standing up, organizing, and demanding better to see any change. And that is the same thing that is happening in this election in 2025, but it is an uphill battle. To be young and working class is not easy. It is difficult by design. And when other people in this race are leaning on legacy last names and big corporate dollars, have inherited fundraising lists from their father, it's no easy task, but it is possible when we all get in it together. And we are seeing incredible outpouring of support online. Small dollar donors, over 6,000 of them.
Wow.
98% of our donations are under $200, or small dollar donors. It is everybody pitching in what they can to make this possible, because people need to know that they have a fighter, and they're willing to invest in it. And for that, I am so grateful.
And what's the website if people want to find out more about you or donate or volunteer their time?
Yeah, if you want to get in our corner, and I hope you do, you can visit us at DejaFoxx.com. You can learn about our story, read up on our issues, pitch in $1, $5, or whatever you can. And I hope to see you on the campaign trail with us.
Well, Deja, it was very nice meeting you. Keep up the great work. You're doing a phenomenal job. It's very inspirational, and look forward to chatting with you down the road. Hopefully as a member of Congress, but in any event, hopefully your voice is really important to the Democratic Party going forward. So thanks a lot for being on.
Thank you. I appreciate your time. I'll talk